Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Hayden Brown, and I do everything theology, philosophy, and apologetics. I try to, at least. And today we're going to be reacting to a video of Dyer assessing free will and the problem of evil from an atheist. I think this will be a fun video, so without further ado, let's get into it.
I was a Christian, my entire life. I was born a Christian, and as I got older, I started, I got into science, and then I started kind of questioning certain things about religion.
Okay.
And there's certain things like I still want to be a Christian, but I can't lie to myself and tell myself that I believe all the things in the Bible. And I'll give you one example. Okay, so if you picture creation, where absolutely nothing existed. There's no laws of gravity. There's no laws of current flow. There's nothing at all. Only God. And God creates everything. Then you have to question, why did God create evil? Why did God create things to happen a certain way when God had all the power in the world to make it so evil wouldn't even be necessary? Some of the, like right now, I can't jump up in the air and fly up to the moon. So God did put limitations in his creation. So why are other things that are incredibly evil, why are they not limited by God? And also, another thing is...
one could say that they are limited by God, but we're not really in a position to say that, though, necessarily. And I think Dyer is going to do a reductio ad absurdum on this argument, saying that basically the notion of evil existing as a privation, he agrees with the privation model mostly, and that the possibility of that existing even is to have God actually exist. And I found it to be a pretty sound defense that basically the best answer I can give honestly right now is I don't know why God even created, because if you say, well, God created out of his love, well, he's eternally in a loving relationship with himself, though, in the Trinity, right? And so that is one of those divine mysteries. But if we're going off of what we have, we're working with the evidence that is presented to us at present. I think really the best answer is what I think Dyer is going to say, that we really can't account for evil's existence without a necessary good God that makes things actually good. So let's keep going.
Go to eternal damnation. You're going to be cast into the lake of fire for eternity. So it's not necessarily a actual choice. So you really don't have much freedom.
Really, you could say that you have more freedom in that sense, because if we're going to say freedom is the ability to choose multiple things, I don't agree with that necessarily. I think freedom of the will is that you can will what you will, basically. So, like, even if you're kind of not necessarily quote-unquote determined, you can still desire or will to do that thing. So, for example, if your life consisted of only one choice whatsoever, you can either not want to do that choice or want to do that choice, or incline your will to do that choice, not based off of prior circumstances or causes. And so basically, if he's going to define it as multiple options, well, the more options you have are going to be to do evil and not do good. If it's just an array of good things, yeah, that's a lot of things, but you're going to have more things to do if you can do the opposite of all of those in an evil way. So really, you have more freedom on his paradigm, I would say.
In how you live your life. And one last thing, and I'll let you rationalize some of this stuff. In terms of all of us being God's creations, God's children, why would you punish your children with eternal damnation when you know how flawed the human creation is, and the capacity for error in human judgment?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, they wouldn't, knock a cup down or something, and then I punish them with burning in eternal fire and brimstone for the rest of eternity. It doesn't, it's hard to rationalize these things.
Okay, so can I ask you in response some questions? Because that's the way I'm going to argue, is to compare our positions and our worldview. So,
yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And then also, like, the beginning, he said he got into science. Like, none of this stuff is really scientific at all whatsoever. Like, at least I might have missed something. That might be my fault. But because I want to be intellectually honest and humble here also. But really, he's talked about really just morality. And morality, you don't get that from science. So I want to see where this goes. So I'm interested, very interested.
So let me answer your statements. First thing I would say is that you said why did God create evil? We don't think evil is a creation, so we don't think it has any positive existence. Evil is first and foremost a privation, or a what you could say is non-being. And secondly, I would say there's also a further clarification as to what evil means, which is an act of the will. So now it becomes a question of why does God permit evil by beings that have the ability to will evil or good? And I would say, well, although I don't know in totality why God would permit it, the Christian worldview gives me a basis to know how there is good and evil. And I would say that your worldview has no basis to critique Christianity, because you couldn't give an account for good or evil or the true or the false, which would be necessary for doing a critique at all. So I'd be glad to hear, the non-theist as a non-Christian, how it is you can say that anything is true or false or wrong or right if atheism is the case.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, well, wow, alrighty, great, he's going straight into it, straight for the jugular, because of the transcendental argument he'll obviously unpack here in a minute. I definitely, I think, yeah, I predicted that, that on this atheistic worldview, at least it seems like he might be a subscriber to scientism, or just some sort of naturalism, which kind of the same thing. A lot of these terms are just more specific areas of one overarching worldview of naturalism, usually. But we want to be accurate in representing people and honest and steelman their position. But yeah, I agree that evil is privation, and it's more of an act of the will. It's not a positive creation necessarily. So there isn't this metaphysical thing or thing of positive existence that is just evil that's floating around, kind of. It's more of actions that are deprived of moral upstanding necessarily. An analogy that I've heard of is that if you have a car, it's fine, but if rust starts to come, it's not that you're creating something new, it's just that the car is being tainted now. And so if you get rid of all the rust, all that remains is the good car, though. But if you just have rust, then you have no car whatsoever, though, really. And so kind of the existence of good has to be there for the existence of evil and all that. So let's see how he responds.
That's an easy question. But first, I have to ask you about I have to comment on, whether or not God created evil. It's like I said earlier, you have to actually picture absolutely nothing in this world existing. Nothing in creation existed. God created everything. He created our ability to thought. He created our capacity of thought. He created every single law. Mm-hmm. He created absolutely everything. Mm-hmm. We can't create anything that God hasn't already created. So that's my point for the argument on whether or not God created evil.
Well, why is that the case? Why can't God create a world where beings have the ability as secondary causes to actually do things?
I would imagine that he would have to create what the different things that they could do. It would be like a video game. The video game characters can't do anything outside of the way that they.
Well, that's a false. That's a false analogy, because it's a false equivalence between beings that have free will and beings that do not. So, video game characters do not have free will, and the Christian worldview specifically teaches that God does create humans to have the power of free will. So, in other words, you're saying that it can't happen is kind of. It sounds like it's based on prior assumptions, and I would just like to know, on what basis do you know that God can't create beings with free will?
Yeah, exactly. That's good. So now he's going down the determinist route, and that's kind of funny. Like, even if divine determinism, he's arguing, like, he's potentially granting the position. Like, if he's granting that position, he believes that is what Christianity is like a sort of occasionalism, where God just causes basically everything. Really, I don't see how he doesn't get up naturalistic determinism either, where the forces of nature and prior causes, whether they be multiple or just one correspondent cause to the other, doesn't totally determine his psychological states. So I really think that's kind of a dead end for his position, if that's what he believes. But thankfully, Christianity does not teach a sort of hard determinism, unless some sects or denominations might. But I think historic Christianity and contemporary models do not teach that, though. All right, let's keep going.
Well, you have to establish free will first.
Right. Yeah.
There's no, if you have a computer program, or if you have a robot, the robot doesn't know that a program's running. The robot thinks that the robot, he thinks he has free will, but technically there's just a program running.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the argument. So do you want me to prove free will to you?
You can try. I mean, I've thought about it in almost every perspective, but I'd be interested. I think you're a very smart guy.
So my argument for free will is that if free will does not exist, then knowledge is not possible, because the fact that you are arguing presupposes the ability to choose the true or the false, the good or the bad. And so argumentation itself presupposes the reality of free volition, choice, free will.
I kind of disagree with that, because if you think about everything is a reaction to like cause and effect.
Okay. So are your arguments reactions to cause and effect?
Yeah.
Yes, I love this. I love the reductio ad absurdum. Oh my goodness, it's such a fun and that's the thing. Like, it's such a fun critique of a lot of arguments, just putting the same criterion on itself, granting the potential truthhood of the position, and then showing that it's internally incoherent. But also just academically and being honest, that is one of the best arguments I've found. Because like some philosophers like will really heavily emphasize like, oh well, if we don't have free will, then moral responsibility goes out the window. Well, yeah, I can understand that. And then there's other philosophers who have just redefined the meaning of free will so that they can have a compatibilist worldview. For example, David Hume did that. But, I love, like, when I've watched Dyer and also read about it, like, how much effect this argument has in a lot of things. Obviously in tag, and also, like, you can make many transcendental arguments also leading up to tag. And so, basically, like, one of them would be free will. That free will is a necessary precondition for the possibility of knowledge. And then, what is necessary for free will? Well, it's not just a series of determining causes going back ad infinitum. You eventually have to get back to a cause that is by agency. And so, that would be part of, like, the transcendental argument. But anyways, I'll stop. Let's keep going.
Yes.
Okay,
I think everything is a reaction to, like, there was probably one initial movement.
Okay, so you're not actually making an argument. So you're
it could actually be a false belief that's totally wrong, but you're caused to believe and think that it's true.
So it's possible that everything you're saying is a chemically determined. Everything you're saying could potentially be a chemically determined false belief.
True.
Okay. Then you're not making an argument.
So at that point, given that presupposition that everything's determined and there is no free will, the very notion of truth and falsity is an incoherent concept.
And thus, there's no such thing as argumentation. So you can't argue.
And therefore, your position can't be true.
But who's to say that we can't have this type of discussion and it's just predetermined? It's written into the script.
The argument is that if that is the case, then knowledge and truth and falsehood, etc., would be impossible. So it's a self-defeating argument is the point. It's called the determinist fallacy or the naturalist fallacy.
But you can put two computer programs and let them argue back and forth, and without an issue. But
there's nothing true or false about it. That's the point.
The whole computer programming system is based off true and false.
No, it's not. You can't say that.
You can't get out of the matrix in the system to be able to say that. If you're assuming you're part of the matrix too, because you just be determined to say a false belief.
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to point out is the notion of you saying this conversation can be true or false, or we're having agreement or disagreement is meaningless. It's all determined. There is no truth or false given your presupposition, and therefore it's self-refuting to actually say that determinism could possibly be true. Therefore, by impossibility of the contrary, free will must be the case, given that you're assuming all these things.
Right. And I think that we're both kind of like the same argument you're making toward me. It can also, be used toward you guys' argument as well. That
it can. How am I caught in the naturalist fallacy if I don't accept the presupposition of determinism in a naturalistic sense?
Because you don't have to accept anything about physics for physics to still run its course. It does. Whether or not you accept it.
But I'm asking you metaphysics questions. So it's not about physics. So you're assuming that physics.
Yeah, he could have just because I know that sometimes Dyer usually somebody brings up either physics, that's a pretty overarching that's the pretty overarching topic, and then he could have just went straight into the problem of the external world, for example, or induction. But yeah, I like how he's staying on just narrowing it down just to free will and the problem of evil that the guy was talking about.
This is the same thing as metaphysics. What we're talking about are metaphysical issues that go beyond physics. So as an atheist, you're trying to say, well, but physics is determined, it's just cause and effect. But we just gave an argument from metaphysics about free will that shows that if you adopt the determinist presuppositions and worldview, you can't know that it's true. So your argument assumes that naturalism and determinism are true. If naturalism and determinism are true, you can't know that it's true, is the point. And that's a defeater.
I can kind of see what you're saying, but it's still, in my opinion, there's just way too many things leading to, or at least leading me to believe that free will is not necessarily anything more than just, a computer program running. It may be very complex at this point.
Let me put it another way. So your position is X, and ours is not X. But given your position that it's all determined, we're determined to say X just as much as you are to say not X.
And there's no way to delineate between X and not X. So that's the defeater.
X and not X, one's not more valid or invalid than the other, which is another illustration that your position is self-refuting.
So, and your reply is
saying we're wrong and that my position is correct. But if your position is correct, then both are equally determined.
And no one is correct.
What they are. Right. And so they're both equally valid. So that means something that is both, that you would say is both true and false, the same. Or something could be both true and false in the same way, which is nonsensical.
I'm not saying that you guys are wrong or that I'm right. I'm just saying that it seems to be the way
So now you're trying to talk out of the argument. The argument was that determinism is true. So you did make that argument.
Well, I'm arguing for it, but I'm not saying that I'm absolutely right. I'm not, my mind isn't closed at this point. That's why, I'm talking to you guys
Right.
and asking the question. But from my perspective, it looks more like everything's acting on cause and effect.
So if the first argument fails because determinism is self-refuting via the naturalist fallacy, the determinist fallacy, then what are the things that you say makes it look like it?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with you that it failed either, but I don't want to argue with you guys.
Explain
you guys
how.
both kind of agree with it, so I'm just.
It's a really important argument.
You can say I don't agree, but
grasp what the argument is. Obviously,
right.
We can't move forward.
Right, but I'm just saying you can easily create a computer program that argues back and forth. I mean, so that, in my opinion, destroys your argument.
So, do you understand that that's not a reply, because it doesn't matter if you say that? That's just stating what you already think is the case. So how does that answer the objection that we offer? The objection is that if it's the case that everything is determined, you could never know it. And you're replying by saying, but everything's determined.
Why could you never know it?
Because it's a defeater. It's a self-contradictory argument to say everything is determined, but I know it's true that everything is determined.
Yeah, I think they've just kind of gone in circles, honestly, for this bout. Like, yeah, with the computer program thing. Like, I mean, yeah, he's not escaping the same position or worldview. I mean, at the base level, it's still all determinism on that. He's just saying, well, it's a complex computer program. Well, and one of the things, too, is if the complex computer program does have components of true and falsity in it, truthhood and falsehood, and has signs of specified complexity, well, that would give rise to rationally thinking that agency was involved in creating that code or programming the computer in the first place. And so I think the computer program is not a super good example for that, because computers, namely, are created and designed by humans. So I think something better would, I mean, I don't know, like, I think it would be, yeah, actually, I don't know. There's not many places to go. I was going to say matter itself, but, a rock can't do reasoning, though. He could say biology, but biology is like, with recent discoveries, I'm not super into the science field or biology field, but I know that, what was it, Richard Dawkins or something, that said there's like, I don't know, like 400 volumes worth of information in a single-celled organism. Something of that sort. If I get that wrong, don't quote me on it, because that's not the argument I use usually. But yeah, I don't think biology or matter would be a good place to go. Anyways, all I'm saying is I don't think that was a good analogy, really. But let's keep going.
For example, your position would be determined. So you couldn't actually know if that were true, because you'd have to know if it weren't true as well.
So there's no way to know the true from the false. Do you understand that you've surrendered the possibility of debate and argumentation by arguing this? That's the point.
And like I said, another defeater is, if everything's determined, you could be determined to believe that false beliefs are actually true. In other words, you could be determined to be deceived. So according to determinism, how do you get out of that problem?
It's a box. How are you out of the box?
In either way, we would both be in the box.
I don't adopt determinism. I'm not arguing determinism.
Determinism puts you in a box, is what Jay is saying. We don't buy into determinism, so we're not in the box.
So you don't believe that
you don't something that's false to be actually true.
Do you believe that God is all-knowing, that God knows everything, past, present, and future?
Yeah, but he can also...
Yeah, oh boy. Oh, whoops. Oh boy, he's going to go into the, what is it? Omniscience, objection that, oh, well, God knows everything, then he had to have determined everything. It's like such a clear, like, non sequitur, and really an equivocation. Yeah, knowledge and determination are not the same things. But yeah, that was a good point. I didn't get that at first. That you could be determined to believe that false propositions are true, and so therefore that's another defeater for that. I think that's more of a probability one, but it's a really good one because you can never know the probability, right? You can never know if you're 90% sure that you're right, or 99% sure that you're right, or 90% sure that you're false or wrong. Sorry. Or something of that sort, which I think is really good too. So, anyways, this is pretty good, so let's keep going.
God is all-knowing, that God knows everything, past, present, and future.
Yeah, but he can also, by divine power, create beings that have free will and are secondary causes. There's nothing about God's character that prevents him from creating that.
So if God knows everything, past, present, and future, then that's a form of determinism right there.
It's only a form of determinism if
categories.
It's
the way
only
that we talk about time and the way that God relates to time.
I just said God can create beings that are secondary causes. It's only determinism if God is the sole cause. There's not one cause in the universe. God creates beings who are secondary causes.
Well, we have to kind of disagree on that. And I mean, I'm pretty sure there's people that agree with you guys, and I'm pretty sure there's people that'll agree with me on it. But let me add one more portion to that argument that may, further my case a little bit.
Okay.
So if you if you think all the way back to the beginning of creation, whenever God, started creation off, everything, I would imagine that everything was void. There was no movement. There was no time. There was nothing physical. So there had to be
That's one part. That's one part I actually have to be very, very humble about things like time and space, for example. Like, what is time and what is space? And it's really I bet there's a transcendental argument for this also, but I just have yet to hear it necessarily. And one of the things that I've reasoned is, for example, like William Lane Craig believes that God is in time, that he's not outside of time, that at the moment of creation, his willing to create, that's when he entered into time and create, well, not into creation, but into time necessarily. And so God is, quote unquote, pseudo bound by time. Not that he doesn't know past, present, future, or has omnipotence or divine sovereignty or anything of that sort. It doesn't subtract God's sovereignty in any way, but that he's inside of time. And I found that relatively reasonable because if we think about it, what is time? If God exists beyond time and eternity, I don't see if time is just a measurement of, I don't know, it's light or something of that sort. And so this is where I have to be humble and say that I don't really know necessarily. And so that's why I'm starting early, and I'm still reading, and I'm still researching and everything. And I want to be fair to other people's positions. So something of the sort like Time and Eternity by William Lane Craig is a book I want to read and really figure that out. And it might be really something that we can't figure out until eternity. But that's okay. I think there's always more to know if God is truly eternal and infinite, that there's always more to know about him. And if we knew one of the quote-unquote mysteries that people label, I'm sure it wouldn't subtract from his divine sovereignty and infinite glory and eternality. But anyways, let's keep going.
An initial first movement, that every other action was a reaction to that first movement. If I set up a bunch of dominoes, and in order to get the dominoes rolling, I had to hit one domino, and then every single domino, miles and miles down the road, for years and years and years,
yeah, I mean,
they're all still a result of that one.
Yeah, he just keeps presupposing determinism. Yeah, I know exactly where this is going.
So this is a
I can speak on this.
This is
so part of the problem is that the modern mind can't really understand this because moderns have limited themselves to only one type of causality. So the type of causality that you're talking about is like what Jay said, that there's only one, that you're conceiving only one kind of proximate and efficient causality. But prior to modernity, the ancients had at least 4 different types of causality. And as Jay said, furthermore, primary and secondary causality. So the mistake that you're making is saying there can only be this one type of causality because that's the only type of causality that I can conceive. And that's this kind of domino, efficient, deterministic causality. But I can just point to the history of philosophy. The majority of philosophers have never adopted that that's the only form of causality that there is.
You guys got some pretty good points and pretty good perspectives.
Yeah, I like how he brought that up. It's been a long time since I've looked at the 4 causes, but yeah, I like how he brought that up, that, you know, just because you can't think of that doesn't mean it's not true. That would be a fallacy of incredulity. And that the 4 causes that you have, the basically, I think, I'm going to do my best to remember, I think the agent cause, so the personal cause, and then the formal cause, so that's the idea before like the forming of the something. If I'm making a microphone, for example, I'm going to make a blueprint, or I at least have a blueprint in my mind that then I'm causing. And then you have the material cause, that's where I'm actually molding it and using materials to make it. And then 4th, the final cause, which in theology would relate to eschatology. And, everything end times, basically. And so the final cause, or teleology in philosophy and theology in some sorts would say, like basically what is the final end of everything. And so, yeah, alrighty. That's, I think I got that right. Correct me in the comments if I got that wrong. But anyways, we'll keep going.
I appreciate y'all giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, man.
Time up in here, so
Appreciate that.
thank you guys.
Yeah, good questions. Last thing I would say is that the notion of a causal chain like dominoes is kind of the mechanistic, deistic idea of causation that comes from the Enlightenment. And like Father Deacon said, that's just one type of causation. So typically physicalist views of the universe rely on just that type of causation, as if that's all it means is just a domino and thus the chemically determined causal chain. But there's different types of causes or different types of agents. And so the arguments that you made, although you may not have been intended on going into metaphysics, they actually relied on a host of metaphysical things that I was trying to critique.
Oh boy. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I pray that it benefited you in some way, and that we could have learned something. I know I definitely did. Just going over like the problem of free will and evil. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'll keep being intellectually honest and keep on learning, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it.